Welcome back to Hilaal Live. Now, the United Ulama Council of South Africa has called on South African Muslims to participate in a survey which is being conducted by the CRL Rights Commission. The survey is to ask faith-based communities about religious freedom within South Africa. Joining us now to discuss this is Imraan Subrathie, who is the chairperson for the steering committee on LGBTQ at UUCSA. Imraan, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakallah so much for joining us.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Firaz. Jazakallah, thank you so much for having me, Firaz.
No, it's an absolute pleasure. Okay, Imraan, talk to us about the survey. So it's been conducted by the CRL Rights Commission, if I stand to be corrected.
That's right. CRL Rights Commission stands for Cultural, Religious and Linguistic Rights Commission. It's a body established by government to navigate and to monitor whether the constitutional right of people as embodied in our constitution, as so far as cultural, religious and linguistic rights, if these are being, if there are any complaints from South Africans, and our recourse is to the CRL Rights Commission. So it's a government constituted body, it's a monitoring body to ensure whether our cultural, our religious and our linguistic rights of South Africans are in order and if it's not compromised. So fortunately for us, alhamdulillah, there is a survey that they have taken out. The CRL Rights Commission has taken out a survey on the freedom of religion in South Africa. And this is so crucial for us, and it comes at a very crucial stage for us as Muslims in South Africa, because we are seeing a gradual shift in the religious freedom that we previously enjoyed. So I just want to say this is what the CRL Rights Commission is. It's a government constituted body, and they've come out with a survey called the Freedom of Religion Survey.
Okay, Imraan, you say a shift in religious freedom. Can you elaborate on that, please?
Yes, many of us might not be aware, but there is a gradual shift in this sense. There are one of the great agendas and the biggest agendas that's going around in the world at the moment is the LGBTQ movement. Okay, and we've seen the movement lying nearly dormant for the decades, but in the last few years and the last few months, it's really taken over the world by storm. And in South Africa itself, South Africa recognizes the rights of everybody and the rights of people who have alternative and same-sex preferences, etc. And so what we're finding is that there is a drive to impose the system or the way of example. One of the ways to substantiate why I'm saying there's a shift, one of the agendas and one of the things we're seeing coming through is the pro-LGBTQ agenda and mentality is being imposed upon South Africans, and more specifically us as a Muslim community, it is being imposed upon Muslims. And you may ask, how is this happening, Imran? Very recently, there was one of the reasons just to give some perspective, why was the steering committee established by UUCSA? Almost a year ago in 2022, I'm also the secretary of AMAL, Association of Muslim Accountants and Lawyers. We received concerns from certain Muslim schools of the introduction of compulsory sexuality education in schools. And they asked us, do we need to teach this? Because it goes against the teaching of us as Muslims, against the concept of modesty, etc., etc. And what is the alternative? And that was a year ago. For us, a year later, what we're finding is, and it was really quite scary in the Gauteng Department of Education in grade 10, in the LO assignment, there was actually a question on homophobia. There was a question that was posed on homophobia, and the expectation is that the child or the student must answer the question according to a pro-LGBTQ mentality. And if the child does not answer, the child will be marked down. Now, clearly, this is one of the significant indications of the shift in our religious freedom. We could have allowed the child to present the Muslim perspective, and our perspective should be respected. But that was not the case. the sad part is that our children, and in the question itself, there are signs like pictorials like love is love. There's no information, there's no education. That is a sensationalism, putting it into an assignment paper for our children at grade 10. So these are the telltales that there is this shift happening. And clearly that for us is a clear indictment of our freedom of religion. And this is one aspect that we will be highlighting to the community, inshallah, in the CRL survey. And another example, for example, so this entire move in the education department towards the normalization of the pro-LGBTQ mentality is now being there. As I mentioned, previously it was an introduction. Now they've been assessed and there is a bias. To this extent, also, if you look at the guidelines that the Department of Education has provided, in one of the guidelines, in the introduction, they speak about myths about LGBTQ, and they say it is a religious myth that this is, they describe this as a myth. It is not a myth in Islam. This is based on 1,400 years of Islamic theology has proved that the LGBTQ same-sex relationships is not something that Islam allows. So it's not a myth, it's something that's established. How can you call it a myth? So that's one example, compelling example that's very current. This assignment was now in the third term in Gauteng Department of Education. Another example, for example, is there is a bill that is being, at the moment being discussed, is called the Hate Crime and Hate Speech Bill, in which it's if it becomes law, it would mean that our ability to express ourselves in certain areas, again, example, LGBTQ, let's draw on that example. If we were to say, discuss and educate ourselves with regards to LGBTQ and what does Islam say about same-sex relationships, it's gender dysphoria, and quote Islam, quote Hadith, quote the teachings of our pious, that conversation that our ulama could have on the mimbar, in our masajids, in our discussions, could be seen as hate speech. Again, an indictment of our freedom of religion. And there are others. Example, there was another bill that was called the Bela Bill, the Basic Education Law Amendment Bill. And that bill, for example, one of the challenges we faced there was the department wants to take complete control over homeschooling. And homeschooling was an opportunity parents had, that if we are not happy with the type of education that the department is giving to our children, if it's something that goes against our religious teachings, then we should have an alternative, and that was homeschooling. Even that, the department wants to encroach and take that away and say this must be monitored by the department, put checks and balances, almost to the extent that that homeschooling curriculum will now have to be aligned to the department's curriculum, which obviously, as I alluded earlier, incorporates certain aspects that are foreign to our Islamic principles. So this is where, when I mentioned there is a gradual shift towards our freedom of religion. These are just some of the examples and not all the examples.
Imraan, I have to put in one final question. We know that obviously as Muslims and Islam, we don't work in a small little bubble by ourselves. There's always consultations and discussions with other faith-based organizations, for example, Christianity and Judaism. Are they sharing a very similar concern to what UUCSA is sharing right now?
Absolutely, absolutely, without a doubt. There is an organization called FORSA, Force Freedom of Religion South Africa, and it's a largely a Christian-based organization, and absolutely all morally conscious religious organizations are feeling this shift, and particularly in the context of LGBTQ. So it is not an isolated, not a Muslim problem, it's a South African religious problem, a South African morally conscious problem, and my appeal to your viewers is the CRL survey is out there. It is a survey that every religious person in South Africa, every Muslim, every person who's religiously conscious must take the time to complete the CRL survey where you articulate very clearly that your religious freedom is being compromised, and there are links on social media how to complete it and to provide, because if you say you have been compromised in your religious freedom, they will ask you for examples. All those have been provided in the social media examples. You just need to copy and paste onto the survey.
Imraan, Jazakallah so much for joining us here on Hilaal Live. Imraan, can you hear me? Jazakallah for joining us here on Hilaal Live.
Jazakallah for having me.
No, it's an absolute pleasure. That's Imraan Subrathie, the chairperson for the steering
Jazakallah for
committee
having me. Thank
on
you so much.
LGBTQ at UUCSA. Well, we will be now going for Isha Salah, and after the break, I'll have your latest in news, finance, and sports. Do stay tuned.